performance of the man, his antecedents, the people he has surrounded himself by, the policies, how the economy has tanked, and just how we have pretty much handled different things. And you begin to wonder that, okay, why is he coming out with this last now victory speech to pat himself on the back as he exits office in the next 17 months? So there are two ways to look at it. The first being, this is just the sentiment of the man who's almost an octogenarian and is about to retire, but at the same time is that, okay, but why is this necessary when,
you're about to take a bow?
When the majority of the populace are not happy with what you've done. Yeah.
Okay, but there's a part of the story that also talks about the fact that, President Buhari said that he does not expect Nigerians to appreciate him when he leaves office, but only wants them to realize that he's done his best. So, I mean, we're looking at the analysis now. In the time that he's been in office, there's 17 months left, right? Would we say, from your assessment, or would you say that? Okay. Would you not? I mean, okay, you know what? You can be, I mean, there are different ways you can phrase this, but how would you say his performance has been so far?
You're asking for my personal assessment.
Yes.
I would say Nigeria is off than where we were when he took office. That's the best way I'm going to answer that. And there are many indicators to speak to why that is. You can look from everything from the economy to healthcare to education to security, and those are areas in which this particular administration have not done very well in.
But then again, there's also been 2 recessions while this administration has been in power. So, there's that debate that it's because of the recessions that Nigeria hasn't thrived.
No, Patty. It has nothing to do with it. They're not connected, and for me, those are just convenient excuses. Okay? Because policies drive how you come out of any particular recession that you find yourself in, and policies determine how you get into any recession that you find yourself in. The chickens will always come home to roost. So let's just be careful with that. And I think it's important that if we're going to if we're going to judge things properly, let's judge things properly and objectively without being sentimental.
All righty. Thank you very much for that. 0809-444-0981.
And make sure you go over to youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos to catch us live.
Okay, so let's talk about the next story from Premium Times. It says, my government's working very hard on local production of vaccines. And, so there's this talk, of course, it's not a talk really, but it's a known fact that we're really dependent on, other nations to produce vaccines. And that's one of the reasons why it's not enough to go around for, our people here in Nigeria. However, though, do you think that we're up to the task of creating our own vaccines?
To answer that question, yes, absolutely, 100%. We are up to the task because it's not as if we don't have Nigerians, number one, abroad who are part of vaccination programs in India, Europe, and America.
Okay.
So it's not as if we don't have the capacity to do that work within systems that actually operate properly. The next aspect, which is the more painful aspect, Heidi, is that we used to do this. So it's not as if we don't have history of producing vaccines. I mean, just going through this article, and I'd love for everybody to go through it. It's a wonderful history lesson that talks about how between 1940 and 1991, we were producing vaccines along the lines of smallpox and some of the other, measles, rabies, yellow fever, and some of the other diseases that existed at that time. And we ran fantastic vaccination programs. I've said of this program countless
times. That went outside of the country, no less.
That went out, that we exported. Thank you very much. That we exported to other parts of Africa. That I always talk about. I remember in Nigeria in the 1980s. I'm telling my age, but fine. I was still very young then. But I remember then vaccination programs where people used to, the chairs were outside in certain primary healthcare centers, outside schools, outside government facilities, and the line used to be around the block for people to go get vaccines. So I don't know why we have this all of a sudden visceral perspective about taking vaccines in Nigeria when this is something we used to do with a lot of robust energy. And we used to produce these vaccines. We couldn't import them because the systems in terms of transportation, cold storage, and everything else did not exist. So we had to locally produce these vaccines. And to the point, Shock, we used to export them. And we used to export the knowledge and the formulas to produce these vaccines to the WHO. The reason why we stopped, Kaide, is because of corruption. Corruption drove us to this particular point because it requires investment.
Officially, the reason why we stopped was because the government in 1991 wanted to reactivate and upgrade the facility.
Yeah.
Of course, we are in 2021 now.
That's code word for we want to divert the funds towards something else.
I'm just saying officially.
I mean, that's the statement.
It might have taken a couple of decades, a few decades to upgrade this facility.
Three decades.
And then in 2021, we were told that 10 billion naira was going to be released towards.
And 1 year later, we haven't seen a nickel of that money spent.
I
But-
think
but-
talking about that, but now the president hasn't put a timeline to when this is going to happen. I mean, he didn't give details of when the production is going to start. But I mean, you mentioned now that it's taken almost 3 decades, right? So when can we possibly say we're going to see this?
Well, it's
Is it up to the next administration?
it's about deliberate action, right? When's the best time to plant a tree?
Now,
Right. So you can't always say, oh, we don't have the resources. You literally have to deliberately invest in making sure that you're able to have the things you want for tomorrow. That's the whole purpose of it. You reap what you sow. So when you ask that question about when is it going to happen, it literally starts today, and it's how deliberate and intentional the government wants to be about ramping back up this vaccination development center to be able to produce vaccines that can address certain issues so that we don't have to keep importing. And I think what that now does is that the knock-on effect of it is that you eradicate the vaccine apathy that you have in Nigeria, where people are now not even wanting to take the vaccines that we happen to purchase from abroad because of all sorts of reasons around it. But when you're able to control production, you're able to control the narrative, and you're able to now better mandate people to now get vaccines so that we can get ourselves out of this current pandemic.
Got a message here from Tayo. He's being funny here. He says, I want to be president. I'm too old to do it, but I have time to do weddings and book lunches.
That is funny.
Chima comes in to say, talking about the appreciation, who on earth appreciates failure? Just thinking out loud. And JJ comes in to say, of course, he has done his best, but the question is his best Nigerians deserve? In my opinion, no. I watched that interview he made on the station, and I wonder why I wasn't shocked at many inspiring comments. Okay, all right. A lot of people are going in for this one.
All right, we've got more messages coming in. So we've got this one in from McLean, who says, putting Buhari's capacity aside, the body language of the government on various issues is the real undoing. He can pat himself on the back, but the facts are there for all to see, says Okpa from Ikoyi. Whilst Chinedu from Ikeja says, if Buhari is saying that old age is hindering him, did he just remember now about his age? He was already 70 plus before 2015. Also, if he had done his best, and his best is not good enough, as the indicators show, that comes in Chinedu from Ikeja. Whilst Yika says, Shopper, upgrading a facility takes a lot of time, at least half a century. Yes. So we're not there yet. We've got another 2 decades to go.
Okay, so our next story is from the Vanguard newspaper, and it talks about the budget. Okay, so the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, that's Ms. Zainab Ahmed, has unveiled the federal government's strategic initiative for revenue generation that will meet the federal government's 10.74 trillion target, which is to fund the 2022 budget. So what's your assessment on this?
I think it's a very, very well laid out article with regards to how she wants to create revenue, which is fantastic. Everything from tax holidays to voluntary asset income declaration schemes and all these wonderful things, because that is how you actually create more revenue, bringing more people on board so that you can actually convert that into revenue for the government. Investments you make everywhere from LNG to the share for share on the minerals and the electronic money transfers and all these different areas where you can be creative and make money from. That's fantastic. But I think to me the larger question is this, and where I always get very skeptical when government comes up with these, how best are we going to create more revenue? My question will always be, okay, so what are you going to do with the money? Are you going to plow it back into the economy to generate some kind of activity? Are you going to plow it back to now remove subsidy? Are you going to plow it back into infrastructure? Are you going to plow it back into education? Are you going to plow it out into all these different things? Because it's one thing for you to come up with these very robust revenue projections of how you can make money, but if it doesn't trickle down to positively affect the average Nigerian, the everyday Nigerian, then I'm sorry, what's the point? Who is that money for? Is it for the, when I hear NPA, Nigerian Ports Authority, declare all these record-breaking revenues year on year, but then you look at the roads leading up to Tinkan Island and the Papa Port, you ask yourself, okay, so what's the point of that? Are you going to take dividends from that particular profits that you've made to actually make the infrastructure of your road networks or your transportation networks for the actual industry that you service even better? What is the point in declaring revenue or declaring any kind of plan for revenue if there isn't a follow-on conversation about what we plan to do with revenue? Why am I saying this, Katie? Because these are public enterprises, not private companies.
Okay.
They're public enterprises which are run by the government. And the primary purpose of it is not to generate revenue so that your shareholders can enjoy it. It's to generate revenue so that the whole country enjoys.
Would you
I
say
mean,
that?
the whole country is made up of, citizens who are the shareholders. So yeah, they can enjoy.
Okay, let me rephrase shareholders then. Okay, so when I say
I'm just
shareholders,
saying.
no, I get you. But when I say shareholders, I'm referring to the specific individuals
Okay.
who work in those entities, not in wonderful, eloquent way that Shopper has
Let me,
described
let me put it this
shareholders.
way. Okay, so at the moment, our debt, Nigeria's debt stands at 30 trillion. We're making so much money for servicing debt. So do you
Yeah,
think that some of this money,
it was 10 trillion when Buhari joined office,
Wow.
but let's not have that
it's
conversation.
38 now,
Yeah.
right? So do you think that some of this money that will be generated should be put back to service these debts, and then the rest of it should be used to,
It's
for the infrastructure that's
it's
being made out
financial
there?
planning. It's financial planning. So if you have a year-on-year projection of how much you're going to earn, you can say X% will go back towards servicing the debt, X% will go to subsidy, X% will go towards infrastructure and all these different things. I mean, when I earn my revenue, I know what I need to put aside to run my home, to pay the exorbitant school fees that keeps me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and all these different things. So it's about financial planning, and I'm shocked that the federal minister of finance, honorable minister of finance, is coming up with this, but not a follow-on actual tangible plan that you can hold them to and measure their performance against, which is where I take exception.
All right. Got a few messages coming in. This one from UC from Solo says, please, in which sector has this government done well? Okay. A lot of people are just.
Yeah, Kathy, that was for you actually. Yeah, so leave it there.
Remember, do keep sending your messages into 0809 440 981. We are also up on youtube.com/smooth981fm, where you can leave messages up on the live chat. Okay, going over to more messages coming in on WhatsApp. We've got this one in from Yinka Bolu, who says, is this not the same Buhari that was crying back here? Is he the one saying all these things about age? If I were a journalist, I would have been locked up since, because I'm going to play him that video of how he cried and how he said he didn't have money to buy a form, and he goes on and on and on, and that's about all we can read. But thank you so much for that message. We'll go back in the stories.
We get that. From the Guardian newspaper, FG forecloses sacking of federal workers to save funds. Okay, so let's put a background to this. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning has foreclosed sacking of federal workers to save funds. Okay, so they talked about, letting some workers go because they need to, generate revenue from different places. But now they've got that idea. But please walk us through the story.
Well, the story is basically saying that they are not sacking people for the purpose of saving funds. That's not why they did it. They're disengaging for different reasons, which let me just be balanced, they're entitled to do. And it's not necessarily for the purpose of saving money. It could be performance issues, it could be age issues, it could be trying to bring in new blood. There are all sorts of reasons. So basically, that's what the Minister of Finance is indicating in this, is that that's the reason why we let federal workers go, not necessarily to save funds. And I understand the explanation, because that's not, how much are you going to save if you actually do that? It's not, because people who have been let go, it costs money to actually do this. You have to give them incentives and make sure that they have the right compensation packages and everything else. So I think on this particular aspect, I will give the government a bit of a pass. But I think part of the reasons is just trying to make sure that they clear out certain individuals within the federal civil service so that they can allow other people to come in and maybe not necessarily have duplication of efforts. And also at the same time, if they're going to employ technology that replaces a lot of manual operations, then there might not be need for certain individuals to work. I remember a very long time ago when companies were buying vending machines, and they were still employing tea ladies, and they were paying maintenance on the vending machines, but still paying the salaries of the tea ladies. And they said to themselves, it doesn't actually make any sense, because what this means is that you're paying for two things. Because if a vending machine that gives you coffee, tea, snacks, and everything else, people can literally walk up there, get it, and go back. So why have a tea person? So they unfortunately have to let that tea person go for the purpose of, because this is where we're moving towards.
Yeah, but we do know that the federal government is more like the highest employer of labor in the country at the moment. So when all these people go, with the way the country is shaped at the moment, then what happens? What do they do?
That's why you have Social Security. that's why.
Sadly, we don't have that here.
Yeah, so that's really where the issue is, and also how best do you now stimulate the economy to give these people future opportunities to work in other industries besides federal government.
And of course, what we've just talked about with both angles also has something to do with what she says when the minister talked about how the government will actually save money, talking
Yeah.
about merging of
And industries and
merging of
ministries, yeah.
So that's also going to we'll see some personnel disruption there
Right.
as well.
It's going to happen. It's the unfortunate inevitability of how government and life works, and people should just prepare themselves for it. So that's why you need to go to skill acquisition centers if you don't have certain skills, so that you can figure out ways to now
Improve on yourself.
improve on yourself, so that you can generate revenue. Please.
All right, 0809-444-0981 still is where your messages can come to. And okay, let's get to the next story. This one talks about enforcing a ban on foreign drinks. We talked about something similar yesterday. This one's from the Punch. It's the LCCI telling the federal government. Now, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry has urged the federal government to protect domestic manufacturers from unfair competition from excess duty on carbonated drinks. So, FG is talking about, adding a certain amount of money, I think 10 naira to carbonated drinks. And the idea is to discourage the consumption of excessive sugar, and also boost revenue.
Okay. Here's my question. Please define what foreign drink is.
I don't know. There are different kinds of foreign drinks, but I don't want to be out of context, so I'm not going to
Right.
my thoughts
So
out there.
the reason why I'm asking what I'm asking, because you have several breweries that are gigantic, to your point, Caddy, employers of labor.
Yes.
Nigerian breweries, consolidated breweries, international breweries, and VAT and all these different companies that produce GSK, Glasgow Smith and Klein, that do employ individuals that produce, even though they are foreign branded drinks, but these things are produced locally. So, for example, NBC, Nigerian Bottling Company, PepsiCo produce all these sugar carbonated drinks locally. So, when you say foreign, is it that you are literally importing a finished product into Nigeria, and that's where the levy is going to be implemented on, or is it that it's on a foreign drink, sugary drink, period?
Well,
Whether it's produced locally or not.
The statement does clarify this
Mhm.
by saying that talking about imported drinks.
It's imported.
Yeah,
Okay,
in order
fantastic.
to protect domestic production.
And that's fine.
However, don't we already have levies on imported drinks that
So-
make them quite high?
So
The
this
price
is
quite
this is a recommendation from the LCCI,
Okay.
which is the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and for Industry.
Mm.
So I don't quite that's why I was asking that question, because I wanted to get clarity on it, because to your point, Shopper, that levy already exists, which is why so it's two things, two ways to look at that, right? Which is why, number one, imported Heineken versus local Heineken is very expensive.
Yes.
But then that's why you see the sales.
Thank you for mentioning names. Imported.
No,
We'll-
okay,
We'll send a check
imported-
to you.
Thank
We'll
you.
send you a check. It's
We
fine.
will.
no problem. A certain imported drink is more expensive than a locally produced one. But at the same time, that's why you'll see the sales on the imported ones, because people's perspective is, why am I going to spend times 1.4 on the imported one when I can have a local one?
But it's not
I mean-
just the popular brand you mentioned. There are other brands.
I
that
just
are
use
not
it as an-
popular. I have a few names off the top of my head, though. And so in a way, somewhat rivals to the one produced here. So, I think they're trying to discourage them entirely and encourage the ones here, because also a certain amount of money is added to the ones here, and it would make sense. If people can't afford this one, then why go for that
No,
one?
but to Shopper's point, that already exists, which is why they're a lot more expensive than anything that's local produced. So that's why I'm not quite
If you go
understanding.
to your local supermarket that may import certain drink, even just looking at fruit juice, you see locally produced fruit juice compared to imported fruit juice,
Mhm.
and the prices speak for themselves.
Right.
Okay.
So, and that in itself should discourage people. And and let me be perfectly honest, I am not a big fan of imported drinks because of the process and the shipping and handling and the expiration dates and all these things. And there is always a different level of taste with regards to freshness with anything local produced versus what is imported. So that in itself should discourage people, because when you think about how much time this particular good has spent in certain transportation and storage units,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be putting that in your body. whereas things that are locally produced have a shorter production line to store timeline. So that in itself should just discourage you from saying, why should
Thank
I?
you for coming from the health angle.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
because
that's
why would
another
you
angle to look
why
at.
would you want to put that in your body? Because I can almost guarantee you a lot of these things are expired when you start drinking it.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I feel we may hear some more from our different associations and chambers of commerce and industry as time goes on regarding the new excise duty on carbonated drinks, because it is something that, yes, does not look likely to go down anytime soon.
Fred from Festac is asking a question. It says, what is the qualification of the Minister of Finance? Because, I mean, he can't see a justification of her office.
Well, Fred, you are entitled to your opinion.
This one from Mega Kamu says, the problem with asking people to do is, what's this?
I'm okay. Let me have a look. Benga, we're about to read your message. Let's just see. There's just no transparency in these matters. Why do we still have ghost workers all over the civil service at federal, state, and local government levels? It is a farce. Benga basically saying that if you did want to save funds by getting rid of personnel, all you need to do is just exercise some ghosts.
Says Mr. President says he's done his best. I try to figure out which best. Is it in the economy, inflation, high cost of living, on economical policies and worse security challenges all over the country? Now I understand. Okay, but thank you so much. We see your message, Ken.
All right, and Dika says, really, are these the people we have put to run our economy and not expected to always go into economic recession? Well, let's move on. Promise from Lagos says LCCI is trying to promote local brands, but the government is already taxing sugar heavily, which is the reason most carbonated drinks have switched over. Do we have to tax everything?
yeah, exactly.
And Tajuddin says, at all times, the policy of this government regarding imported goods versus locally produced goods has always resulted in scarcity and price increase. Although I'm not a fan of foreign goods either, but the government think about the effect of their policies before implementation.
Let's move on to our next story. This one from this day newspaper. Inbound passengers to Lagos face challenges over hiccups in payments for PCR tests. Now, according to the story, they're saying many inbound passengers designated to arrive in Nigeria through the Murtala Mohammed International Airport are stranded in different parts of the world because they cannot successfully pay for their PCR test through the platform provided by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. And I mean, it goes deeper. It talks about some payment platforms that they're working with. But what is the story here exactly?
Well, the story is that a lot of people, especially since they reopened the airports, international travel, and they implemented these COVID testing policies with regards to how you return to Nigeria, have had severe challenges with the payment platform that requires you to pay for the COVID test that you're supposed to take within the 7-day period after you arrive into Nigeria. Not the PCR test that you need to present to travel. Is the payment platform will now pay for your test, which is a whole nother kerfuffle, but I'll leave that there. The one you're meant to pay to say that, okay, when you arrive, you pay for that test, so you take it within 2 to 7 days after you arrive. There are challenges with that one because it is a requirement by the federal government for you to present the negative PCR pre-departure test and then that particular second to 7-day test. A lot of people have had challenges to it. You go on there, the platform doesn't work. Integration issue with certain particular payment platforms, it debits your account, you don't get credit for it, and these are issues.
Now, as someone who has actually had to go through
Experience,
this
right? Yeah, please.
the process, I did notice that there were issues throughout the whole process of trying to register for this, not just with payments, but even just
Everything.
registering my details.
Right. Uploading your negative PCR, I mean your positive PCR, your negative PCR, right?
Everything altogether.
Many steps were faltered. Let me just
Right.
put it that way. However, using those same payment platforms on other sites,
They work perfectly.
they seem to work quite well.
Right, so it's not an issue with Flutterwave or InterSwitch or Paystack or any of those things. No, because it's a functional issue in terms of the background integration and the exchange of APIs between the actual PCS site and these payment platforms, not syncing together.
Now let me think like a regular layman out there. Is it possible this can be done manually as opposed to, electronically, the way
That option should be there, and it is there in a very interesting way. So depending on the airline, and if you can prove to the airline, because this actually happened to someone I'm very close to, depending on the airline, if you can prove to the airline that you made multiple attempts to pay and you couldn't, and you can show that to them, the airline will waive that particular requirement as long as you have a negative PCR. What now happens is that when you land in Nigeria, there is a payment desk if you are cleared through customs and immigration that requires you to pay that 50,000 naira. Okay, so then you can pay that with your, your whatever debit card you have. I don't know if they accept cash, but I know that with a debit card you can pay that upon arrival. Now make sure that you've paid for the test, and then you go take the test 2 to 7 days. The issue is that that particular POS belongs to a certain entity. May not be connected to government, and I'll just leave that there. But to answer your question, that process is in play. But I think once again, it depends on the airline and also how convincing you are with communicating to the airline that you've tried a million times and you've just not been able to pay for this test online.
Thank you very much for that, Waji. I mean, we're totally out of time, but I want to ask you this one last question in one sentence. Lagos moves to ban use of plastics. One sentence.
If you want to be like Rwanda, make sure you have policies like Rwanda. That's what I'm going to say.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, that's our show, but there's more to come in a few more minutes on Lagos Talks 981. Okay. And you can catch Waji up on social media. He's at the Corporate MC with a K. Okay. We're going to take some other messages. Well, we're going to take some of your messages on Lagos Talks 981, amongst other things. Don't forget, this is the Smooth Breakfast Show with Shoko Martins and Kaide Baker. We're here with you all the way till 11.
That was Woo! Shokber Martins. Oh. So have you been in Nigeria all this time?
Oh yes, I have. Well, I've been in Nigeria.
Nigeria.
What does that mean?
I've been in the Nigeria of. Actually, I've been. Let me just stop this.